What happens when an ancient, deeply rooted civilization smashes up against new, dynamic forces from over the mountains and across the seas? Well, for 1,000 years, the Indian subcontinent became one of history's greatest laboratories for that exact question. And the result? It's a story of conflict, of blending, and of a transformation that honestly reshaped the world.
Okay, so let's get right into it. We're zeroing in on the period from the 8th all the way to the 18th century. Now, this wasn't just some slow, gradual change. Nope, this was an era of profound and often really turbulent transformation. It all got kicked off by the arrival of new groups from West and Central Asia, who brought with them new ideas, new faiths, and brand new ambitions.
So, how did this all kick off? Well, around the year 1000, you had Mahmud of Ghaznī's raids. Think of them like lightning strikes. Incredibly disruptive, for sure, but they didn't last. The real earthquake, though, that hit in 1192. When Muhammad Ghori defeated Prithviraj Chauhan, that wasn't just another raid. It was a foundation stone. And from that one foothold, the Delhi Sultanate rose up in 1206, creating a whole new power center right in the heart of India. The Delhi Sultanate, well, it had a good run, over 300 years. But by the early 1500s, it had grown fragmented and weak. This power vacuum, it created the perfect opening for a new and even more ambitious force that was just waiting in the wings. A force that would come in and completely redefine the idea of empire in India. And that force was led by this guy, Babur. I mean, talk about a pedigree. He was descended from two of history's most legendary conquerors, Timur and Genghis Khan. In 1526, he swept down from Central Asia, and his victory didn't just create a new kingdom, it laid the foundation for the mighty Mughal Empire. But he left his successors with the ultimate challenge. Look, it's one thing to conquer India, but it's another thing entirely to actually rule it. And this brings us to probably the most famous Mughal of them all, Akbar. He came to the throne as a teenager, but he turned out to be a military genius. But Akbar understood something absolutely crucial. Conquest is the easy part. The real challenge was figuring out how to rule a subcontinent that was just teeming with different faiths, different cultures, and all kinds of different people. And that right there is the central question of his entire reign. I mean, really think about that for a second. How do you forge a single, loyal empire when the vast majority of your population doesn't share your faith or your background? Do you just rule by force, or do you try to win their hearts and minds? Akbar's answer to this question would define his legacy. His solution was basically a masterclass in building a nation. It was a four-part strategy. First up, respect. He got rid of the jizya, a tax on non-Muslims, which was a huge symbolic gesture. Second, partnership. He made alliances with the powerful Hindu Rajput kingdoms, even marrying Rajput princesses. Third, unity. He created one standard system of administration for the whole empire. And fourth, culture. He actively encouraged this amazing new blend of Indian and Persian art. This wasn't about making everyone the same. It was about creating something new, together. A true synthesis. And you can literally see the result right here. This is the Buland Darwaza, the Gate of Magnificence. Look at it. You've got the grand archways straight out of Persian architecture, and they're seamlessly blended with the intricate carvings and details of Indian craftsmanship. This isn't just a building. It's a statement carved in stone, saying a new, unified culture has been born. Of course, this cultural fusion reached its absolute peak with the Taj Mahal, built by Akbar's grandson, Shah Jahan. Now, we often think of it as just this incredible monument to love, right? But it's so much more than that. It is the ultimate expression of that blended Indo-Islamic culture that Akbar kicked off. A perfect harmony of Persian design, Indian materials, and just pure artistic genius. But here's the thing. A foundation that's built on tolerance and inclusion, well, it needs constant upkeep. After Akbar, the empire began to fray, first slowly, and then really fast. The very policies that had created all that unity were about to be reversed, threatening to just tear the entire fabric of the empire apart. The empire's fate really boils down to the huge contrast between these two men. On one side, you've got Akbar, the unifier. On the other, his great-grandson, Aurangzeb. Now, Aurangzeb was a deeply devout Muslim and a fearsome military commander, but he saw Akbar's whole inclusive approach as a betrayal of his faith. So he brought back the jizya tax, he destroyed temples, and he pushed away the very allies, like the Rajputs and the Marathas, who had become the pillars of the empire. Unsurprisingly, this reversal of policy created a massive backlash. The foundation of trust that held the empire together just cracked. Down in the Deccan, a new Hindu power, the Marathas, led by the brilliant warrior Shivaji, rose up in open rebellion. They weren't just fighting for land, they were building a new identity that directly challenged the Mughals. Aurangzeb spent the last decades of his life in constant, exhausting warfare, just bleeding the empire's treasury dry, trying to put out the very fires that his own policies had started.
And the breaking point was 1707. That's the year Aurangzeb died. With him gone, the central authority of the Mughal Empire basically collapsed. The emperor in Delhi became nothing more than a figurehead, while regional governors and new powers like the Marathas started carving out their own kingdoms. The center just couldn't hold anymore.
And into this swirling power vacuum sailed a totally new kind of player. For centuries, you had European traders hanging out on the coasts, mostly interested in things like spices and textiles. But now, as they looked inland, they didn't see a mighty unified empire anymore. They saw a fractured, warring subcontinent that was, frankly, ripe for the picking.
And this timeline just shows how fast things completely fell apart. After Aurangzeb's death in 1707, the decline was like a snowball rolling downhill. In 1739, the Persian ruler Nader Shah just walks in and sacks Delhi, taking incredible treasures and leaving the Mughals totally humiliated. By the middle of the century, the Marathas were the dominant power. And then, 1767, a date that changed everything. The British East India Company wins the Battle of Plassey.
And this slide really nails the key takeaway. The British East India Company didn't show up with some grand blueprint for conquest. They were merchants. They were there to make a profit. But in the chaos of a collapsing empire, they saw an opportunity. By playing one Indian prince against another and using their superior military discipline, they completely transformed themselves, first from traders into kingmakers, and then, eventually, into kings themselves.
Which leaves us with this just stunning question, right? How did a private corporation, a mere trading company, managed to take over an entire subcontinent? The answer isn't just about British strength. It's fundamentally about Mughal weakness, a weakness that was born from the unraveling of that delicate balance of power and tolerance that Akbar had so carefully built centuries before. And so, the 1,000-year era of Turkic, Afghan, and Mughal rule finally came to an end. The internal challenges of diversity that defined the Mughal Empire were, in the end, not resolved from within. They were resolved by the arrival of an external power from the sea, setting the stage for a completely new chapter in India's long, complex history, the British Raj.